our next event in the On Foreign Policy Candidate Series. We are so excited to have Edmond Laplante here with us to talk about his foreign policy viewpoints and where he views the U.S.'s role in the world. We'll do a brief introduction here. My name is Tim Horgan. I am the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire, a nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization that is dedicated to helping people better understand the complex issues of the day. We're doing this series to help people better understand their choices as we approach the New Hampshire primary in the U.S. Senate race, one of the most hotly contested races here in the country. The World Affairs Council of New Hampshire is a nonpartisan organization, and therefore we take no stances on policies, candidates, events, speakers, etc. We are the platform for discussion, and we hope that you take what you learn from our various programs and make your own decisions about the world today. We are a community-supported organization, and so we appreciate all of our members and donors and sponsors for their wonderful help in making sure that these programs remain possible for us to continue to host and to bring great information to New Hampshire and beyond. We have people from all over the world who watch these events, and we really appreciate your interest. So, turning to Edmond here, he is a Marine Corps veteran and an auto mechanic for the past 30 years. He, as I mentioned, is running in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate seat here in New Hampshire. And so we are going to just dive into a little bit of a conversation. For those who are watching online, if you do have questions, please put them in the chat function and we can get those queued up. But Edmond, I just want to, first off, thank you for joining us and ask you if you can give us a little bit of an overview of what you view America's role in the world to be.
Well, I like to think we're a peacekeeper. I'm a strong believer in the Monroe doctrine, where we mind our own business for the most part, and unless it's absolutely necessary to, jump in and keep peace with our allies or we have to.
Okay. And of course, right now we see a lot of challenges in the U.S.-China relationship. The congressional visits have been escalating tensions with China responding with military drills in the Taiwan Strait and all around Taiwan. Can you talk a little bit about what your view of the relationship with China is, what it should be, and whether or not the U.S. should prioritize support for Taiwan or leave them to their own devices?
That's a really touchy situation, all that's been going on. It was one of those cases where Nancy Pelosi went over there, and it was more like damned if you do, damned if you don't, because now where China threatened, says don't go over there or otherwise we're going to do something. If you back down, you look weak. But then if you go, then you're causing a lot of tension. So my original thought was, why doesn't she just email him, call him, text him, instead of going down there? A lot of Republicans feel, that was the way to go, but I'm kind of against that because I really don't want more conflict than we absolutely necessary, especially with all that's going on in other places in the world. My thought would be, China's claiming Taiwan's a territory of theirs. So my thought would be, couldn't we just declare it like a neutral country? So that way, China can't really get involved, and we kind of keep our distance and keep everything safe. And we have a lot of interest in Taiwan because they create the semiconductors, and that is very important for almost everything we have. And unfortunately, we don't produce semiconductors here so much. I know we're starting to try to, but the raw materials are just not here, and the workmanship is not here yet. So I think it does benefit us from keeping Taiwan close and keeping a good friendship with them. where China, back in 1988, they weren't so great, and they kind of snuck up on us. We were helping them out, doing all kinds of things, helping them with technology, and I think we should have been paying more attention to what they were doing and what was going on, because now I think they're pretty much surpassed us, and it's pretty scary.
And in terms of taking Taiwan out of the equation, in terms of the rise of China, you mentioned that they have overtaken us in a couple of ways. Do you think that the U.S. should be trying to manage the rise of China? Should we be allowing them to do what they want to do and we'll do what we want to do? How do you view that relationship, that bilateral relationship?
Again, that's really, really, really tough, because, if we try to manage them and we push too far, we cause a lot more tension. And I'm worried about being a military guy. I'm worried about them aligning with Russia. I mean, not saying that it would happen, but it could. And if that's the case, China right now has subsonic missiles that are beyond our technology and that we couldn't intercept before it happened. And if that happens, they could take out a Navy vessel and it's kind of game over, because Navy vessels bring the Marines and they bring the Army and the Air Force ships. So we got to tread lightly on how we use our diplomacy with them.
And do you see any key areas for potential collaboration between the really two largest countries, two most powerful countries in the world? We have had relations around climate change, around international trade. Where are those areas for collaboration that you may see?
Well, I would like to hope we could collaborate. For example, I know, being an auto mechanic, I'm keep up on the EVs, batteries, and stuff like that. And we left the Congo and pretty much gave it to China. Now, you may not think the Congo is not a big deal. Okay, well, we do the right thing. We're trying to, slow down the climate change and stuff like that by getting out of there. However, the Congo produces cobalt, which is one of the main ingredients in the EV batteries. So now that China's they 10 times the production down there. So we kind of shot ourselves in the foot on that, honestly.
Yeah, and that's a great anecdote for just sort of, at least my own personal view of the U.S. role in the world, is places where we leave and pull back. It's not just going to revert to, local control or anything like that. Other international powers are going to come in and try and fill that vacuum. So you mentioned a lot going on in the world these days, and of course that's very true. Another big area of conversation is the ongoing invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are around that situation?
Sure. Basically the same. With Russia and Ukraine, I would like to see Ukraine become a neutral country, because this whole thing kind of reminds me of the Cuban Missile Crisis. You may say how, but so Russia put their missiles in Cuba, and America was like, oh, no, we're not having that, which, fair enough. Kind of the same thing. NATO came in and wanted to use the naval base in Ukraine, and Russia's, no, we're not having that. So to me, it's kind of the same. Now, my grandmother's Polish, and so I have relatives down there, and we emailed them even way before this, twice a month, we were talking. They sent me clips of different professors down there. It has to be translated, but they're saying basically this is NATO's fault, and what did you think Putin was going to do? He gave up Poland and maybe 15 years ago and said, okay, I'm not happy about this, but I'll allow it. Not happy about it. Then when they try to do it with Ukraine, no, I'm not doing that. So I can't really blame him. However, it doesn't excuse the fact that, yes, he's addicted, but that's what they do. That's their way of life, is to conquer and, grab land. And so that's kind of tough too. What my relatives, like I said, they work in Ukraine, so they have a different outlook on this. They blame NATO, actually, and they're not too happy about that. And it's kind of crazy, because they're very, very well educated, and very devout religiously. But when I talk to them about it, I'm like, what do you think we could do? Because hey, I want to, their boots on the ground, and they know it's their life. Nonchalantly, just like pass the salt, oh, you have to put a bullet in his head. And coming from them, I'm like, wait a minute, you guys are really religious. I don't think that's the answer, but I understand what they're saying, that diplomacy is not going to work.
Right. So then, following on that, do you support if you were to be elected to the Senate, and assuming that this conflict is still continuing, what is your view on support of Ukraine with weapons, with financial support, humanitarian support? What do you think the U.S. and its NATO allies can and should be doing to support Ukraine?
Boy, that again, not to keep using the word, it's tough. However, like I said, from what I've heard from boots on the ground, and my relatives, is they say Ukraine's probably one of the most corrupt governments in the world. And from what I understand from the clips they sent me, professors and scholars and stuff like that, that only 30% of this money that we're sending is actually going to the cause. The rest is going to the government, and their TV's access is only limited to what they want in propaganda. And so, again, I would like to see Ukraine become a neutral country where Russia can't touch them and the NATO can't touch them. And I think that's, at this point, probably the best we could hope for.
Mm-hmm. And so Russia has taken territory previously in 2014, as well as currently fighting over territory now. What do you see as the end game here? Do you see Ukraine needing to give up this territory? Should they continue to fight and try and retake this territory? Where do you see the end solution there for?
Well, from what I understand, Kiev was more or less Russian populated, and it was at one time the capital, supposedly, like USSR, Russia. And from what I've been understanding, there's been like a civil war between East and West Ukraine because a lot of Russians are actually there. So I would hope, not optimal, but maybe East Ukraine goes to Russia and then West Ukraine stays sovereign, And then again, I hope we can just declare everything a neutral country, and both sides, everybody would just, okay, leave everything alone. But I really don't think that's the best case scenario, I believe.
Okay. Also, inflation is running rampant across the globe. I heard today that Turkey is seeing like 90% inflation this year. The U.S. obviously is seeing high inflation. Gas prices are starting to come down, but the sanctions that have been placed on Russia have played a role in increasing oil prices, increasing food prices. The war has also done that. Do you think that the U.S. should be continuing to sanction Russia for their actions in Ukraine, or is there another solution, or just step back and let the parties figure it out themselves?
Yeah, I believe, we tried to sanction them, and obviously, I don't think it's really working. And it's hurting other countries too, because other countries rely on Russia for their their gas, their heating, and winter's coming up, and also rye and wheat and stuff like that. So it's really hurting everybody. And I think at this point, maybe we should step back and let the UN and the EU take care of this, and that's their deal, that's their backyard, and I would hopefully they could come to some kind of agreement.
Mm-hmm. So. Just so that I understand correctly, the EU and the UN would potentially continue the sanctions regime with the U.S. stepping back from that sanctions regime, or following what the EU and the UN are deciding. Just want to make sure I understand correctly.
Well, like I said, yeah, I believe we should step back and let them take care of that. Whatever they decide, okay, fine. If Russia and the EU and the UN all agree, okay, this is what we're going to do, awesome. You guys, you figured it out, you hashed it out. I'm sure there's going to be some, people that are sore about different, deals, but if it avoids war and it avoids famine and hunger and possibly deaths. I'm all about that.
Great. So let's see here. Next, we wanted to go over to Afghanistan. Of course, we're about a year out from the international withdrawal of support and the Taliban regaining control of that country. As a former Marine yourself, can you give me a little bit of your assessment of the 20 years in Afghanistan and where we are today?
Yeah. Well, I really thought it was a bad idea to begin with. And unfortunately, in Pakistan and stuff like that, Russia tried to invade them years ago. And that was for 13, 14 years. Nobody won. We should have paid attention to that and said, and I think they were probably more dedicated to that than we were. Usually when we send in troops to end a conflict, we don't follow through. I believe if we were going to end a conflict or try to be engaged in one, go all in or don't go at all. Because just leave them, like quarter of what we ask and we'll leave that there for 10 years. Quarter of what we ask and we'll do that. It doesn't do anything. It just gets soldiers killed. It devastates the land, total devastation for everybody. So I really don't think we shouldn't have been there in the first place. And I understand he wanted to pull out the troops. The way it was done, not a big fan. But I am glad we pulled out, but just not the way it was done.
And we're seeing, of course, a massive humanitarian crisis in that country, worst drought that they've seen in decades. Obviously, the Taliban government does not have access to many of the international institutions, financial and otherwise. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your view of the U.S. and our allies' role for humanitarian aid in that country, and how do we work with the Taliban to make sure that aid goes where it needs to go?
No, again, that is really, really tricky. I remember being in the Marines. We did a humanitarian mission. Sometimes we drop off pallets from our, I flew in a helicopter. We drop off pallets of, food and supplies, and next thing you know was marauded by whoever. And, unfortunately, when we dropped it, there was a couple times where, they got the food, they got the supplies, they went to the warehouse, and they were slaughtered, and all the stuff was taken, so which is really sad. But I would love to help them out as much as we can. But with the Taliban, I just don't see it happening. I just think that it's more and more people are going to get hurt. And, I mean, good initiative for us to, hey, let's help you out, good heart. But the end result was just usually not good. It doesn't go to where it needs to go.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes from asking the military to do too much, do things that they weren't designed to do. They are very effective at going in and taking over territory, but then holding that territory and building democracy as they were asked to do in Afghanistan is not what they're equipped to do. So also, a lot of this that we've been talking about, of course, involves our NATO allies and our allies around the world in order to combat some of these challenges, some of these issues. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not allies are valuable or a drain. Can you talk to us a little bit about your view of allies, whether or not the U.S. should be including countries like Sweden and Finland in NATO, or should we be pulling back from these alliances that we've created?
I think NATO in its original form, excellent idea. After World War II, let's all get together and make sure this never happens. Great idea. The foundation was great. But now I think they've gotten too big for the britches, basically, collecting wealth. And, and I get the idea, okay, the great idea, the concept is great. Let's all get together and that way no one can mess with us. However, I just think they're starting to gobble up things that they shouldn't be doing. For example, from a common man point of view, my eyes, what I see is, for example, like Germany. Hey, U.S., Germany's military budget is only like 10%. And yet they're like, United States, hey, come help us. We need your protection. We need the army here to guard us. And my thought is, Okay, but you're selling weapons to Russia, then you're telling the United States, hey, help us, we need you here to protect us from the Russians, but you're selling weapons to Russia. I have a hard time grasping that concept. I would think maybe we should just kick back a little bit. We have issues right here at home. And I think you've got to take care of your own house before you start taking care of someone else's house. And if we don't start taking care of ourselves first, we're not going to be in a position to help NATO or help anybody for that matter.
So if this is just how my line of thinking goes, and I want to make sure it's what you're saying. So pulling back from the alliance of NATO, pulling back from security guarantees for Europe, and ostensibly taking the savings from reducing military presence abroad, and would you redirect that money to other priorities within the military, or as you say, focusing on things such as democracy promotion or whatever priorities you may identify for the U.S.?
Actually, we could probably do like a multi-level deal. We'd take the money that we didn't spend, and we don't have to get it all together, but just drastically cut it. And that way we could, use money to hop up our military. Because, like I said, Russia and China both creating subsonic missiles that we can't detect, and that's not a good thing. And also, we could use the money, maybe put some of it to the border or humanitarian, crisis here. The baby formula, for example. For my God, how could that possibly happen where we have to rely on other countries for baby food? That's kind of embarrassing on a world scale,
Yeah. So, you in that answer identified China and Russia as large threats militarily. So wouldn't it make more sense to strengthen those alliances so that we don't have to fully fund, of course, Germany has increased their military spending since the invasion of Ukraine. Other NATO countries have been increasing their spending. But even just adding a country like Finland or Sweden, wouldn't that have a multiplier net positive effect, even if their militaries aren't as strong as ours, rather than us having to sort of go it alone and backfill all of that, 2 or 3% of each of those countries' budgets going to their military? It would seem that then if we pull back from that alliance system, we would then be footing an even larger bill to manage some of these crises without the help of our NATO allies.
Yep. I would like to see us maybe everybody start paying their fair share, basically. Not necessarily for us to get it all together, but for everybody to pay equal amounts instead of the United States, shouldering the brunt of it. And I would love for China and Russia, United States, to come some kind of agreement, but I just think we'd probably end up getting the short end of the stick. Honestly, we'd have to concess to them so much for them to, because at this point they're pretty much ticked off at, both countries are ticked off at us, and we're not happy with them. So I think we'd really have to give a lot more than we're willing to give for them to say, okay, we're good. I just don't see that happening.
Okay. The next area I wanted to sort of dive into, continuing sort of down the allies and the NATO discussion, is the state of our military. Many people have talked about how either, depending on your viewpoint, either the military is in the best state it's ever been or it's in the worst state it's ever been. And the usual talking point there is looking at the number of Navy ships we have, that we currently have fewer Navy ships than we had in 1920, but those ships are much more technologically advanced and capable. So can you talk a little bit about what your views of the state of the U.S. military is, and the current strength? Would you focus on increasing, decreasing, keeping the same? What are your thoughts?
I would definitely try to increase it and invest in more future technologies. Because like I said, China has subsonic missiles that we can't detect. Russia has the same. Now, Russia just has this anti-detection device that they're putting up, and the thing is huge. And they're also working with India with semiconductors and stuff like that too. So that's another worry we have to worry about. I would like to, hopefully, we get our naval vessels up to par so they can match what China has, and just to keep us safe. At the same point in time, though, we got to keep them safe to keep us safe. And right now, it's not looking good. I see reports all the time about China came up with the third prototype of this, and Russia has a prototype for a submarine right now. And I'm like, oh my God, what are we doing? And I'm trying to find anything that we have, and we don't really seem to be doing anything.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the key points to focus in on there. So moving over to trade, another big issue, particularly again with inflation being what it is and supply chains being snarled ever since the start of COVID-19. But there's also for a long time been a discussion about the sort of two theories of thought around free trade versus fair trade. Do we want to have completely open trade with as many countries as possible, where everybody specializes, similar to what we've seen in the semiconductor industry in the past several years? Or do we want to focus on trade agreements that are going to level the playing field, whether that's in labor laws, taxes, environmental standards, et cetera? Where do you fall on that spectrum? Of course, it's never one or the other, but.
Yeah, ideally, I would try to do a little bit of both, but like you said, it's almost impossible. The fair trade, then, someone's always going to be, oh, that's not fair, you're taking advantage of us here, and you taxed us way more than like 200% on this, we're not taxing you that way, so, there's conflict there. And then on the other side, hey, let's, China's right now buying up our family and stuff like that. I'm like, that's worrisome. We shouldn't be allowing that to a certain extent. I understand. Hey, they bought it fair and square. However, given the circumstances, what's going on for now, let's put that on ice for a while and say, okay, stop. We got to stop, selling this on land and stuff like that. And these companies were creating semiconductors. Make it here, keep it here for now. Then once we're safe, then later on, once everything's all secure and calmed down, all right, then maybe you could send your companies abroad. But for the most part, I would like to see all these companies stay in the United States till we get things get stable around the world.
Well, I think we would all like to see things a little more stable around the world, but that might be a bit of a long time before we see that, unfortunately. So speaking of trade with China in particular, the Trump administration put the phase one trade deal in place with the promise of phase two. Phase two has not happened yet, but many of those sanctions or tariffs, that the Trump administration had put in place, the Biden administration has kept. Can you talk a little bit about, if you are in the Senate, what you would like to see happen in terms of trade relations with China? Do you see a mass decoupling or further integration, or again, somewhere in between?
I would hope it would be somewhere in between. But right now, I just, the way the tensions are, I think we made it right. For now, cut the ties a little, cut it, and wait till things calm down, and maybe even 5 years from now try to negotiate it. Because right now everybody's fuming, and just one little spark could ignite everything. So right now, just I think we call it all off. Say, all right, till we get this straightened out and things diffuse it, let's call it quits right now.
Okay. You also mentioned as one of the big issues here in the U.S., but also is really driven by international events, immigration and the border. That's obviously a big concern for many people. Can you talk, I guess first, let's talk specifically about the U.S. southern border. What plans do you see? What would you support for the U.S. southern border if you are elected to this seat?
I was stationed there in San Diego from '99 to 2007, and so I've seen it, firsthand. It is very overwhelming, and even back then. What I would like to see is us enforce laws that we had in the past. In 1965, they changed the law, and then again in 1974. I would like to go back to what we know has worked. So if you come across the border, you not be a burden to the taxpayers. That would help out tremendously. B, have a sponsor. So if whatever prices that's occurred, the sponsor would be taking care of that, and assimilate to our laws and ideals. I think it worked in the past. I don't see why it can't work now, other than a cultural war, the aspect of it.
And so we've seen a lot of conversation about the border wall in particular. Do you view that as an effective tool to securing our southern border, or are there more effective approaches that you would like to see the U.S. take?
Well, when I was down there, I would see these big cement trucks going around filling in holes, and I asked the girl I was with, I'm like, what? She was a local, so what are they doing? She's like, that's a hole. They dig them and people come through the tunnel. So there's just so many things that a wall wouldn't prevent that. I do agree with the wall, because in certain places, yeah, sure, but in other places, like rivers and waterways, maybe drones or manned stations. I know it may sound kind of crazy too, but maybe help from the National Guard or the reserves or something like that. Just like a humanitarian kind of deal, but still just to enforce, just to help out, to take the burden off of the Border Patrol. I know they're out. They don't have enough people there to do that, enough man hours, and so that's what I will try to do.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about some policy in there for our immigration system, but anything that you want to add around specifically, an increase, decrease of immigration, increase, decrease, stay the same of sort of where we're at with refugee intake, or as well as, we had a pause during COVID on the H-1B worker visas, and we see, hundreds of thousands of jobs available here in the U.S. That are not being filled. So how can we use our immigration policy to strengthen the U.S. And make it a process that works for everyone?
Yeah, what's going on really stinks, because, we have people trying to come over doing it legally, and it's quite pricey. It's like $10,000, I believe, and it takes like 4 or 5 years. So, people coming across illegal, it sends a message that, hey, why are you doing that? That's crazy. But I still, right now, I think we should put a halt on it, because it's just, it's not sustainable. It's overwhelming. With everybody coming in illegally, I don't think it can be sustained. It's going to just totally overwhelm everything. So right now, I think we should put a halt on it. At least we get things.
A halt on what is it in that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No. Legal immigration and, of course, illegal immigration. It's okay. For now, we're closing the borders. I know it's not popular. However, the sustainability of it, we have to come down like gangbusters now, unfortunately, because we let it get to the point where now it's just going to be overwhelming, and it's just going to totally ruin us.
So one of the things that I've seen reported is that the U.S. is one of the only, if not the only, advanced economy with a not an aging population in the same way that China, the EU countries are, and mainly that's driven by immigration, and that's a net positive to the U.S., particularly with how our Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security is set up, because we need more workers than retirees. So what would putting a pause on immigration do to the rest of the system that we've created that really relies on sort of the immigrant population that we're utilizing today?
Well, I think that if you're able to work, you should be working instead of giving stimulus checks to I know people that haven't worked in 5 years and they're getting stimulus checks, which that's great, whoever that helped you out. However, taking advantage of it, and that's killing everything. It's an insult to the older people, and like I said, how it works. Well, obviously how it works. The younger people work and the older people retire, and then when that group gets that old, well, the younger people, their pay takes care of all that. Originally, to be honest with you, I would have liked to see where your pension and stuff like that and Social Security would have came from a personal account, where each person would have had his individual account that they put in their whole lives. And if they die, okay, well, I'm going to give it to pass it on to my kid, or hey, I'll pass it on to whoever needs it.
So, but back to the question of putting a pause on all forms of immigration at this point. My question more focuses on we are reliant on immigration in order to increase the working population, since long-term Americans have a lower birth rate, and therefore without immigration we would have an aging population similar to the other advanced democracies. So I guess really the question is, how long would you support a total pause on immigration, and if it lasts more than a year or two, isn't that going to hurt our overall economy?
I'd pause it for as long as it takes, and I would take a look at all that, and maybe every year we'd say, okay, where are we as far as this hurting us, or is this benefiting us? And then we could tweak it from there. Okay, if it's starting to work good, all right, things are getting back. Okay, we can cut it, let a little bit more in, trickle in, and if it's going great, then all right, then we're going to be open for legal immigration, and still have our laws enforced about illegal immigration.
Okay. So you are campaigning on the idea of sending the average man to Washington in order to bring the average man's perspective. So I'd just like to ask the question of, to the average man, what does international relations mean to you? Is it important to your life? Is it something that you think everybody should follow, or more of a luxury item, we'll call it?
Well, up until maybe 3-4 years ago, I thought it was like a luxury item, and now with China developing these subsonic weapons and Russia doing the same, and all the conflict, now I think it's very important, where we do pay attention to that, and they should be alarmed about it. Whereas before, hey, no big deal. They always fight. They've been fighting for hundreds and centuries of years. That's what they do. They always grab land, and However, now where they have better technologies than us, now it's kind of, we should pay attention to this before it gets way out of hand.
Okay. And beyond the sort of national security viewpoint, which I think you outlined very well there, are there other areas that you are concerned about in terms of international relations, things that you think people should be really paying attention to? Or is it really that the U.S. should mainly focus on the national security aspect of things?
Yeah, I think we should basically concentrate on national security. That'd be my biggest concern as far as the security. And, and also like terrorist watch lists and stuff like that. And homegrown terrorists coming in, people sneaking in, and also the northern border, people coming in from there too. So I wouldn't exclude that either.
Okay, great. Well, those are the questions I had outlined for you, but I'll turn it over to you if you have any final thoughts or comments that you'd like to make before we end our discussion today.
Not just, when I got out of the Marine Corps, of course, I had custody of my son, and he broke his leg, and I found out the hard way that the VA covers the veteran, but not the veteran's family. So I had to take a second job at Walmart, and while I was at Walmart to help pay for his bills, and when I was there, I learned different points of view from different people. I mean, retiree ladies, widows, retirees, school kids, everybody, a different point of view. But the one thing they all agreed on was that people in Washington and Congress, they were out of touch. And I was listening to one NPR, matter of fact, they were reporting how 98% of them never had a blue-collar job. And that alarmed me. I was like, how can they represent us when they haven't stepped inside our shoes? And I'm sure a lot of them are, I like to think that most of them have a good heart and have a good sense, but I think they need to get more in touch with the everyday people. And I wanted to have a system where New Hampshire, I know you can get a hold of your senator anytime and call, but a lot of the younger people, they want instant gratification, where bang, right after 3 minutes. So I would like to have a system where I could talk to groups maybe once a week or once every other week, where, hey, Senator Laplante, this is what's bothering us. What can you do? You know what? I didn't know about that. Thank you. I will see what we can do. I will talk to, your representatives, or even if it was a group from each county. In each county, I could say, what do you guys got going on for me, Cheshire? What do you got going on for me, Belcap? What do you got, where I could talk to everybody and say, hey, what do you guys got? Because I want to be really involved. And I know on a federal level, that's, the District 1 and District 2, but I would like to get more involved in that, so that way we don't feel that I'm out of touch. And that way I don't get out of touch. I could say, I was busy working on trying to keep the border secure or whatever, and I didn't realize that New Hampshire was having a problem with the heating, oil coming up and the prices and the electricity doubling in the month of August, and I'd be like, holy smokes, how did I miss that? So I'd want to be really more involved in the aspect of the state.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time and for your insights. I really appreciate you giving us this opportunity to have this conversation with you. And thank you to our audience, whether watching live or the recording of this event. We hope that you are now feeling like a better informed voter and that you are more prepared to make your decision on September 13th, which is the New Hampshire primary day. We really hope that you get out and vote. It is important for our democracy. For us, it doesn't matter who you vote for, it just matters that you vote. So thank you so much. We appreciate your time, and we hope that you have enjoyed our conversation here today. Thank you.